Vampire Survivors features bright flashing lights. If you are sensitive to this, you may want to stop watching this video. Vampire Survivors is a roguelike survival game which describes itself as minimalistic. Its developer goes by the name Poncle. Although it could be described as a bullet hell roguelike, it's actually a lot more unique than that. It's currently in early access and on sale for the insanely low price of £2, $3 or your regional equivalent. It may look like nothing special at a glance, but it has an addictive depth behind the simplicity. The gameplay of Vampire Survivors is simple. You're swarmed by enemies of increasing number and strength, and you can defend yourself with attacks that fire automatically and evasive movement which you can control directly. Enemies you kill drop gems. Gather enough of these and you'll level up. When you level up, you get the choice of either upgrading an item or getting an additional one. Items are either active or passive, and you can hold 6 of each type. Occasionally, a boss will spawn. Kill it and it will drop a chest which will upgrade some of your items at random. The core loop of this game is a risk-reward between trying to stay alive and trying to get enough levels that you don't fall behind. It's simple, but it does get tense, and it has a surprising amount of depth with all the builds you can make. It's also not afraid to let things get crazy. The number of enemies even near the beginning of a run is downright insane. It may seem overwhelming, but it creates a tense and hypnotic experience. The end result is a game where you can learn the mechanics within a couple of minutes, but it's deep enough to keep you playing for hours. As your run continues, things will only get more and more insane. I did find that towards the end of a run, it can get a bit difficult to tell what's going on. I won't show too much footage of the end of runs, because YouTube's compression doesn't handle too much movement very well and there is a lot going on visually in them. Levels last up to 30 minutes, although your build will usually be fully upgraded by around 20 minutes. After around 15 minutes, the game starts to get easy, and there's usually around 10 minutes in each successful run where you literally can take your hands off the keyboard and be fine. I tested this. I hope that when the game's finished, they smooth out this difficulty progression a bit more and make it a little bit more linear. After I played for a few hours and started to figure things out, it also got a little bit easy. I hope that in the final game there are more options to increase the difficulty. There's a selection of a few different maps, but they do all play quite similarly. They add a little bit of variety, but none of them change the gameplay up significantly. There's loads of playable characters to unlock though, and these actually do play quite differently. They all start with different weapons and get different bonuses, which incentivizes you to try different builds, and maybe try out some items you hadn't really used before. Once you've beaten a level, you get the choice to play it on hyper mode, which is faster paced and harder. It's basically a more intense way to play the game, and I found it more enjoyable. I stopped playing normal mode completely after a while. There's a lot of content here, and enough for it to give a good amount of variety. I found it took a while for the game to become repetitive. That said, after around 10 hours it did start to get a bit repetitive, and I don't think this is something you could sink a ton of time into. But there is more than enough content here to get your money's worth, and what is here is fantastic. It's simple, but simple doesn't mean bad. There's something to be said for a game as condensed as this. It's focused on doing one thing well and nothing else. It doesn't do much, but what it does well. I enjoyed my time with VS quite a lot before it started to get stale. The main driver to keep you playing is the metagame progression system. In addition to new items, levels and characters, you'll gain gold which you can spend on permanent upgrades. The progression system feels like it needs a lot of work. It's mostly just flat increases which aren't that interesting. There's nothing which massively changes the game, it's mostly just more damage. You're constantly unlocking things after every run, but most of the things you unlock you wouldn't notice. I'm not sure what they could offer instead, but I'd like more interesting choices than just more damage or attack faster. In my opinion, this metagame progression system is the one that needs the most work. It's passable, but it's not something that would keep you playing long term. Presentation wise, VS is nothing special. It looks the way you'd expect a £2 game to look. It's not awful, but I don't think I could describe it as a good looking game. It does take a lot of inspiration from Castlevania in its visual design, so if you like the way Castlevania looks, you might like how this game looks. To be fair to the game, the graphics couldn't be much better than they are because of how many enemies are on screen at a time. I imagine the game would get quite laggy on lower end PCs if the graphics were much better. With all the flashing lights and effects in this game, it can become a bit too noisy to process, although I think that's part of the charm of the game. On the audio side, the game is a mixed bag. The sound effects are good, they're distinctive for each weapon which helps you tell what's going on when things get chaotic. I did like the music at first, but there's only one track for each stage and they're quite short. They loop a lot even during a single run, and I found that they got a bit grating. I actually turned off the music after a while. As for bugs, I didn't notice any. The game is surprisingly polished for an early access title. Vampire Survivors may be in early access, but it is perfectly playable. The only system in the game which felt unfinished was the Arcana system, which got added in the latest patch and clearly still needs work. The system itself seems like it will be good once it's polished up anyway. The core gameplay is so simple that I don't think it will be significantly different when it's finished. You're not going to miss anything major by playing it now, rather than waiting for release. In terms of what is to come, the developer says the game is about 70% complete. Outside of new items, characters and stages, there's also a new gameplay option and a new gameplay mechanic to come. It's hard to tell what these could be, but I'm sure they will only add to the variety. Regardless, there's enough content here already to make it worth playing, and it feels like a complete game. While this video is more of a preview than a review, I can't resist giving my own opinion on whether or not VS is worth playing in its current state. It's a simple game for sure, but not every game needs to be an epic. Sometimes it's nice to play something small. I found the game a relaxing way to turn my brain off and something fun to do while listening to a podcast or watching a YouTube video. The gameplay is surprisingly deep, and in my opinion it is a good game. It manages to do a lot with its concept. You certainly can't argue with the price. For £2, this game has so much content. After playing for 12 hours, I do feel like I've gotten everything I can out of this game, but it was an enjoyable 12 hours. So in my opinion, Vampire Survivors is worth playing in its current state. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you all next time.